You're hurting right now. The silence feels deafening. You're wondering what they're thinking, if they miss you, if they even care. And that's exactly what they want. See, avoidants don't fear losing you in the way you think. They don't fear the breakup. They fear intimacy. They fear closeness. So when you go no contact, deep down, they're hoping you'll do exactly what they expect. Chase. Break the silence. Prove to them, once again, that they don't have to risk emotional vulnerability because you'll do the work for them. Avoidants expect you to break no contact. They don't necessarily sit there waiting for your text, but deep down they assume it will come. Not because they believe you're weak, but because history has shown them that when they pull away, people come running. This is the pattern they've lived by, the unspoken rule they've followed. Distance creates pursuit. It's a dynamic they know all too well, and it allows them to maintain emotional control without ever having to confront their own fears of intimacy. When an avoidant detaches, they do so instinctively. It's not something they consciously think about in the way you might imagine. To them, emotional closeness feels suffocating. It threatens the independence they've built their identity around. So when things start feeling too deep, too connected, too vulnerable, they retreat. Maybe they ghost, maybe they act indifferent, maybe they suddenly become too busy. However they do it, the goal is the same: to create distance. And here's where it gets tricky when they pull away. They expect you to react. They anticipate the confusion, the frustration, the desperate attempt to bring them back. Because that's how the game has always played out. This isn't necessarily malicious. Most avoidants aren't sitting there rubbing their hands together, plotting how to make you suffer. It's simply their nature, a learned behavior from years of self-protection. They assume you'll reach out because in their experience, people always do. They rely on this cycle, sometimes even subconsciously. Keeps them safe. It keeps them from having to take accountability for their emotional walls. If you're the one who reaches out first, if you're the one who fights for the connection, they never have to face their own emotional limitations. You do the work and they remain comfortably distant. But what happens when you don't? What happens when for the first time you break the pattern? At first they might not even notice. An avoidant mind rationalizes silence in ways that protect their ego. They're just giving me space. They tell themselves they'll reach out soon. But as the days pass and your name still hasn't appeared on their screen, something shifts. The certainty they had starts to waver. They realize that the thing they took for granted, your effort, your persistence, your willingness to push past their walls, is no longer there. And this is where the real discomfort begins. When you go no contact and truly stick to it, it forces the avoidant to face something they've spent years running from: the reality of loss. Not just the loss of a person, but the loss of control. They're no longer dictating the pace, no longer deciding when or if connection happens. And that terrifies them. Because now the silence isn't a tactic they're using, it's a reality they have to sit with. Avoidants often don't realize the depth of their feelings until the option to reconnect is taken away from them. They thrive in the push-pull dynamic because it allows them to keep one foot in and one foot out. But when you refuse to chase, when you hold your ground, they are forced to confront the fact that people don't wait forever. That love, no matter how patient, will walk away when it isn't met with the same energy. Some avoidants will reach out, but not necessarily because they're ready to change. Many just want to restore the balance they're used to. A simple, "Hey, how are you?" can be enough to pull you back in. If you respond, the cycle resets. They got the confirmation they needed. You're still there, still waiting, still willing to do the emotional heavy lifting. But if you don't, if you truly stay silent, that's when the real test begins. This is why no contact isn't just a strategy. It's a statement, a declaration that you will no longer be a participant in a game that leaves you emotionally exhausted. Avoidants expect you to break no contact because in their experience, love has always come at the cost of self-abandonment. They expect you to prove them right, but this time you prove them wrong. No contact isn't about them. It's not a strategy to make them miss you. It's not a game you play to trigger a reaction. It's not about waiting for the day they realize your worth and come running back. That kind of thinking keeps you stuck in a cycle where your healing is dependent on their actions, and that's the very thing you need to break free from. No contact is about you. It's about reclaiming your energy, breaking old patterns, and finally giving yourself the space to see things clearly. When you first go no contact, it's easy to tell yourself it's temporary, that if you just stay strong for a little while, they'll notice your absence and come back changed. But that mindset still puts them at the center of your healing. It still makes your growth conditional on their response. And that's not real healing, because true no contact isn't about waiting, it's about letting go. It's about shifting your focus away from what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and what they might do next. Instead, it's about turning inward and asking yourself the real questions: why did I tolerate inconsistency? Why did I put my needs second? Why was I willing to accept breadcrumbs when I deserved more? No contact forces you to sit with yourself, and that's where the real work happens. Because as long as you're focused on them, you don't have to face the deeper wounds that kept you in that situation in the first place. The need for external validation, the fear of abandon, the belief that if you just love someone enough, they'll change, these are the things that need your attention. These are the things that no contact gives you the space to heal. The truth is, if someone truly values you, they won't need your absence to realize it. They won't need silence to wake them up. Love isn't something that should have to be proven through distance and suffering. If someone can only appreciate you when you're gone, that's not love, it's loss aversion. And even then, many people don't come back because they miss you. They come back because they miss the way you made them feel. They miss the validation, the comfort, the certainty that someone was always there. But that's not the same as genuinely wanting to grow and show up differently. No contact is about breaking the illusion that you need to hold on to someone who wasn't holding on to you in the first place. It's about recognizing that your peace, your healing, and your happiness do not depend on someone else's ability to choose you. When you shift your focus away from them and onto yourself, you start to see how much energy you were pouring into something that was draining you. You start to realize that the love you were so desperate to receive from them is the love you need to start giving to yourself. And that's the hardest part. Because the moment you truly stop focusing on them is the moment you have to sit with yourself. It's the moment you have to face your own emptiness, your own wounds, your own need for external validation. But that's also where your power is. That's where transformation begins. Because once you start focusing on your healing, your growth, your boundaries, you stop waiting. You stop hoping for someone to change. You stop settling for the bare minimum. And when that happens, you become someone who doesn't need to go no contact as a strategy because you naturally walk away from anything that doesn't align with your worth. No contact isn't about them. It never was. It's about you finally choosing yourself, not as a tactic, not as a temporary move to get a reaction, but as a permanent shift in the way you see your value. Because the second you realize your worth isn't dependent on someone else's ability to recognize it, everything changes. People don't change because you suffer. They don't suddenly wake up and become a better partner because you're hurting. They don't transform overnight because they see you in pain. Suffering has never been the catalyst for real change. It's just the illusion we cling to when we're afraid to let go. Deep down, you might believe that if they see how much they've hurt you, if they truly understand the depth of your love, they will finally realize what they've lost and become the person you always hoped they could be. But that belief keeps you stuck in a cycle of waiting, of hoping, of trying to prove your worth through your endurance. And the truth is, people don't change because you suffer. They change because they choose to. Pain doesn't inspire change in someone who isn't ready to face themselves. It doesn't force self-awareness where there was none. If someone wasn't willing to treat you right when you were standing in front of them, giving them your heart, your loyalty, your patience, why would your suffering be the thing that changes them? If anything, it only reinforces their belief that they can continue to take without giving, that their actions don't have consequences, that you will always be there, waiting no matter how much they hurt you. Real change comes from within. It comes from deep personal reflection, from a genuine desire to grow, from an internal shift that no amount of external suffering can force. Someone doesn't suddenly become emotionally available because you're in pain. They don't suddenly become consistent because you've cried yourself to sleep for months. They don't wake up one morning and say, now I see their worth just because you went through hell. Change happens when someone decides to face their own demons, take responsibility for their own patterns, and do the work not because they're afraid of losing you, but because they truly want to be different. Waiting for someone to change because of your suffering is a dangerous trap. It keeps you tied to a version of them that exists only in your mind, a potential that may never be realized. It makes you believe that if you just endure long enough, if you just love them harder, if you just show them what they're missing, they will wake up and finally be ready to love you the way you deserve. But love doesn't work that way. Growth doesn't work that way. The people who truly change don't do it because they hurt you. They do it because they've reached a point where they can no longer run from themselves. They do it because something inside them shifts, because they make a conscious choice to be different, because they are ready to break their own patterns, not just to keep you, but to become a better version of themselves. And until that happens, nothing you do will make a difference. No amount of suffering will push them toward growth if they aren't ready to take that step on their own. The hardest lesson in all of this is understanding that your pain is not a tool for transformation. It's not a bargaining chip. It's not the thing that will finally make them see your worth. Your suffering does not hold the power to change someone who doesn't want to change. What it does do, however, is show you where you need to heal. It shows you where you've been giving too much, where you've been waiting too long, where you've been sacrificing yourself for the hope of something that isn't real. And once you realize that, you stop waiting. You stop hoping that your pain will be enough to shift them into action. Instead, you take that energy and turn it inward, where real change can actually happen not in them, but in you. If someone truly values you, they don't need your absence to realize it. They don't need to lose you to understand your worth. They don't have to watch you walk away to feel the impact you had on their life. When someone genuinely cares, they show it in the present and the way they treat you, in the effort they put in and the consistency of their actions. Love is not something that should require a dramatic wake-up call. It's not something that should only be appreciated once it's gone. Real love, real value is recognized in the moment, not in hindsight. Yet so many people convince themselves that walking away is the only way to make someone see their worth. They believe that if they just disappear, if they go silent, if they create distance, the other person will finally have an epiphany and come back changed. But if someone needs your absence to understand your value, that means they were never truly appreciating you while they had you. It means they were taking you for granted, assuming you would always be there, assuming they could put in minimal effort and still keep you in their life. And that's not love, that's complacency. When someone values you, they prioritize you. They don't let you question your place in their life. They don't make you feel like you have to prove yourself or constantly remind them of what you bring to the table. They see you, they appreciate you, and they show up. They don't need a reality check to understand your worth because they never doubted it in the first place. The people who suddenly realize what they lost when you walk away, more often than not, they don't miss you, they miss the way you made them feel. They miss the attention, the validation, the comfort of knowing someone was always there. But that's not love, that's just a reaction to losing control. And even if they do come back, what are they really offering? Is it real change, or is it just a temporary response to the fear of losing something familiar? The truth is, the people who truly value you will never put themselves in a position to lose you in the first place. They won't make you feel like you have to beg for their time, their effort, or their commitment. They won't treat you as an afterthought and then suddenly act like they care when you pull away. Real love, real appreciation doesn't need distance to be understood. It's felt deeply and consistently every single day. So when someone doesn't recognize your value while you're right in front of them, don't waste your time trying to teach them through absence. Don't make it your mission to make them miss you. Because the people who genuinely see your worth, they don't. Need to lose you to know what they have. They cherish you in the moment, they invest in the connection, and they make sure you never have to wonder where you stand. And the ones who don't, they were never truly meant to be in your life in the first place. Your worth isn't based on someone else's avoidance. Their inability to show up for you, to commit, to be present, has nothing to do with your value. It's easy to take someone's emotional distance personally, to believe that if you were just more lovable, more exciting, more something, they would have stayed. But that thinking is a trap, one that keeps you stuck in a cycle of self-doubt, constantly questioning what you could have done differently. The truth is, someone's avoidance is a reflection of them, not you. Avoiding people pull away not because you're not enough, but because closeness feels unsafe to them. Maybe they've been hurt before. Maybe they never learned how to handle emotional intimacy. Maybe they have deep-rooted fears of being controlled, rejected, or vulnerable. Whatever the reason, their emotional walls existed long before you came into the picture. You didn't cause them, and you can't tear them down by proving your worth. Yet when someone distances themselves, it's natural to internalize it. You start analyzing every interaction, every conversation, wondering if you were too much, if you said the wrong thing, if you could have done more. But avoidance isn't logical, it's emotional. It's driven by fears that have nothing to do with how valuable or lovable you are. A person who is emotionally unavailable isn't pushing you away because you lack something. They are pushing you away because they lack the ability to embrace connection. And if someone can't meet you where you are, that is their limitation, not a statement about your worth. Think about it. If you had a treasure in your hands and someone walked away from it, would you assume the treasure had no value? No, you would understand that their decision to leave says more about them than it does about the worth of what they walked away from. It's the same with relationships. Just because someone chooses to distance themselves doesn't mean you are not worthy of love. It means they were not capable of receiving and reciprocating it in the way you deserved. Yet so many people fall into the trap of trying to earn love from avoidant partners, believing that if they just prove themselves enough, the person will finally let their walls down. But that's not how it works. Love is not a test you have to pass. Your worth is not something you need to convince someone to see. If you have to fight to be chosen, then you are in the wrong place. Avoidants often make you feel like you're asking for too much, when in reality, you are only asking for the bare minimum consistency, effort, emotional presence. These are not unreasonable requests. They are the foundation of any healthy relationship. And if someone cannot give you that, it's not because you're asking for too much, it's because they are willing to give too little. Your value does not decrease because someone is unable to love you the way you need to be loved. You are still whole, still worthy, still deserving of the kind of connection that doesn't make you question yourself. The right person will not run from you. They will not need distance to feel safe. They will not make you feel like loving them requires walking on eggshells. At the end of the day, you have to remember that someone's emotional unavailability is not your burden to fix. It's not a challenge for you to overcome. It is their journey, their battle, and only they can decide to change. Your only job is to recognize when someone's avoidance is making you doubt yourself and step away before you start believing the lie that their distance means you are unworthy of love. Because you are not, and you never were. No contact is your power, not a punishment. It's not about teaching someone a lesson. It's not about making them suffer or hoping they realize what they've lost. It's about reclaiming your energy, your self-respect, and your emotional well-being. When you go no contact, you aren't trying to manipulate someone into missing you. You're choosing to step away from a situation that was draining you, confusing you, or making you question your worth. That is power. That is self-love. Too often, people frame no contact as a tactic, a way to spark regret in someone who couldn't appreciate them. They count the days, watching and waiting for a reaction. But when you treat no contact as a punishment rather than a personal boundary, you're still centering the other person in your healing. You're still making them the focus. And that's not what no contact is about. No contact is about you, your peace, your clarity, your ability to break free from a cycle that no longer serves you. Walking away from something unhealthy isn't cruel. It isn't selfish. It isn't an act of revenge. It's an act of self-preservation. You are not cutting someone off to hurt them. You are cutting them off because keeping them in your life was hurting you. There is a huge difference between using silence to control someone and using silence to protect yourself. No contact is about the latter. It is about recognizing that your time, your heart, and your emotional energy are valuable and that not everyone deserves access to them. When you decide to go no contact, you are making a powerful statement not to them, but to yourself. You are saying, I refuse to chase someone who isn't meeting me halfway. I refuse to keep explaining my worth to someone who doesn't see it. I refuse to settle for breadcrumbs when I deserve a full meal. That is strength. That is growth. There will be moments when it's hard, when the urge to check in becomes overwhelming, when the silence feels unbearable, when you wonder if they even care that you're gone. But in those moments, you have to remind yourself why you walked away in the first place. You have to remember that the pain of staying in something unfulfilling is far greater than the discomfort of temporary loneliness. No contact is not about punishing them, it is about freeing you. And here's the truth, if someone truly values you, they won't need no contact to realize it. They won't need your absence to appreciate your presence. If they couldn't show up for you when they had you, that's not going to change just because you went silent. And if they do come back, the real question is, are they returning because they genuinely want to be different? Or are they just trying to regain the comfort of having you in their life? No contact gives you the space to see things clearly, to detach from the emotional roller coaster, and to decide whether reconnecting is even something you want anymore. At its core, no contact is not about getting them back. It's about getting yourself back. It's about breaking free from a situation where you were undervalued. It's about proving to yourself that you are capable of walking away from anything that doesn't align with your worth. And when you fully embrace that, when you stop seeing no contact as a waiting game and start seeing it as an act of self-empowerment, everything changes. Because suddenly their reaction doesn't matter anymore. The only thing that matters is you choosing yourself, choosing your peace, and never again settling for less than you deserve. You don't need someone else's recognition to validate your worth. You don't need their absence to prove what you already knew you deserve better. No contact isn't about waiting for them to change. It's about realizing you no longer have to. The power was never in their hands, it was always in yours. And when you finally embrace that, you stop looking back, but you stop hoping for what could have been. You start moving forward, fully aware that the love, the peace, and the validation you were seeking from them were always things you had the ability to give yourself.